Hello, today we will be talking about the Great Barrier Reef. The Great Barrier Reef is a coral reef located in Australia. And in this presentation, we will be talking about the health and the well-being of this ecosystem, as well as its biodiversity. As an introduction, this presentation examines threats to biodiversity in the Great Barrier Reef. We will be looking at the biotic and abiotic factors that have put this ecosystem in danger. In particular, the first part which we will delve into is about pollution and its effects. Here we will be talking about the different types of farm pollution, chemical and sedimentary, and how it may harm the Great Barrier Reef. We will also be discussing what can be done about it. The next part we will be discussing is about the particular species residing in this ecosystem, specifically the crown-of-thorns starfish. This segment will describe not only the animal and its habitat, but also its harmful effects on its surroundings. Similar to the pollution discussion, this segment will also include what is currently being done about this species. The third part of this presentation revolves around the human influence. This ranges from overfishing, coastal development, to industrialism. And finally, we will end with talking about how climate change and global warming are affecting this environment and ecosystem, and how we can help.
So though we can't see the effects of pollution on the Great Barrier Reef just any day, especially here in the middle of Colorado, pollution has a big effect on the health of the ecosystem at the Great Barrier Reef. So farm pollution is actually the number one negative pollutant in the Great Barrier Reef, and there are two types of farm pollution: chemical pollution and sedimentary pollution. So, chemical pollution is pollution caused by harmful chemicals found in fertilizers. So, anytime farmers are fertilizing their crops, the runoff from the land into the ocean delivers those chemicals into the ocean and is harmful towards the Great Barrier Reef. And so, not only is it dangerous for marine life, but it also helps certain types of algae grow, which is the food source for the crown-of-thorns starfish, which is a detrimental species, as you will see further in the presentation. So the second type of pollution is sedimentary pollution, which is caused by farm debris settling on the plant and marine life. So this is delivered very similarly through runoff and irrigation. And the reason this type of pollution is a bad thing is because settling on corals and plants, the sediment blocks sunlight from reaching the organism. So it's blocking any sort of photosynthetic properties and inhibiting growth. And then the plants that serve as a food source for some marine life is unable to grow, therefore eliminating it as a viable food source. So the marine life that live in the area have to migrate to a different area. So, yes, that is why it is bad. However, on the bright side, the Worldwide Fund for Nature is fighting in Australia to pass laws that regulate farming pollution on the Great Barrier Reef. So they're working especially to educate farmers for cleaner fertilization and farming practices, and they're also putting a legal cap on the rate of pollution that is experienced. So by doing that, they're planning on putting a limit to how much fertilizers farmers can use, or the types of fertilizers that they can use. And then they are also pooling together funds for a multi-billion-dollar project to repair sediment barriers. So those are just essentially safety nets that keep the sedimentary pollution out of the ocean, blocking it from reaching the Great Barrier Reef.
Hello, this is part 2 of the Great Barrier Reef final project. My name is Isaac Herzog, and I will be covering the crown-of-thorns starfish, otherwise known as COTS. Now, they are marine invertebrates that feed preferentially on coral, and they spawn during the warmer months around October and February, and they have quite large families. They're capable of producing up to 65 million eggs over the spawning season, and they don't look like your average starfish. They have a lot more arms, and they are quite large. They can be about 25 to 35 centimeters in diameter, and they range in color from purple to blue to red, gray, and green. Now, what kind of problem have and are they still causing? They are known as the coral killers, and each night they can eat their own body area in coral. And during the population spikes, clusters of them can eat living coral faster than the coral can grow. And that is the biggest problem that they have on the Great Barrier Reef. Now, it was found that they were responsible for approximately 36.7% of the coral damage in the Great Barrier Reef, above everything else. And an outbreak of these starfish are defined as 30 or more adult starfish per reef. It doesn't matter the size of the reef, it's just 30 or more. Now, they appear to be increasing in frequency over the last several decades, and they have caused widespread damage to coral reefs in the Indo-Pacific. So, what actions have been taken to help fight against the crown of thorns starfish? Well, fishermen and conservationists who didn't necessarily like them, they started to work together to control the population size. They thought that simply cutting them in half and throwing them back in the water would take care of them and reduce the population. It, well, did the opposite. Because, like other starfish, the crown of thorns starfish can regenerate arms. In extreme cases, it's able to regenerate up to half its body. So, as of cutting it in half, it didn't do anything. Now, what they're currently doing with the Great Barrier Reef is they are injecting bile salts into the starfish, which kills the starfish, but it doesn't harm the surrounding reef ecosystem. A lot of methods for controlling the starfish are expensive and very labor-intensive. If you can only imagine having scuba divers everywhere all over the Great Barrier Reef trying to search for these starfish and injecting them with the salts, it's quite labor-intensive. And the only real way that it can be justified is in smaller reefs that have a high socioeconomic or biological significance, such as breeding sites, tourist attractions, and places with extremely high biodiversity, along with building underwater fences to control them, their movement and migrating. That has been my part on the crown of thorns starfish. I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
So we're going to be going over human influence, more specifically overfishing, coastal development, which includes agriculture and mining, as well as island development and urban and industrial development. So human influence as a whole has a very devastating effect on the Great Barrier Reef and its surrounding area as well. We're going to start going over some of those. Overfishing is defined as the removal of a species or fish from a body of water at a rate that the species cannot replenish in time, resulting in those species becoming either depleted or highly underpopulated in the area. As well, unsustainable fishing in our coral reef areas paired with the wrong kinds of fishing gear have a devastating effect on seagrass beds and surrounding marine habitats. We're going to move on to some coastal development, and this is defined as human-induced change of the landscape within sight of the coastline. A great deal of this land in the Great Barrier Reef catchment is used for grazing, crops, dairy, as well as horticulture, with more than 80% of the catchment supporting some form of agriculture. Moving on to mining, and more in the past, extensive small-scale mining operations have occurred through much of the Great Barrier Reef catchment. In addition, production of saleable coal in Queensland has more than doubled since the early 1990s, and the region is now connected with some of the world's largest mines and coal ports. As well, Curtis Island, just off the coast of the central Queensland city of Gladstone, is the site for the world's first project converting coal seam gas to liquefied natural gas. Moving on to some human influence regarding industrialism, this is defined as the increase over time of urban population in proportion to the region's rural population. When it comes to the human influence on the topic of industrialism, specifically island development and coastal development, some places in the Great Barrier Reef Islands are even in favor of residential areas along with tourism resorts. Continuing on that topic, we're going to discuss urban and industrial development. And besides mining, urban and industrial development in the Great Barrier Reef catchment is not expensive. However, future economic projections suggest an increase in different kinds of land uses. Population growth in the coastal areas is upping the demand for infrastructure and needs for services like roads, water, sewage, and power. Even though these urban areas occupy only a small proportion of the catchment, less than 0.01%, much of the development is located on floodplains and within the coastal zone. As well, port development has been the first major reason for coastal reclamation and filling areas of ocean, wetlands, and other water bodies along the coast of the Great Barrier Reef. Nearly 8 square kilometers is the total area reclaimed within the World Heritage Area since its listing in 1981. Hope you enjoyed.
To end our presentation, we are going to address climate change. The Great Barrier Reef is greatly affected by climate change. It is actually the greatest threat to the Great Barrier Reef. Due to greenhouse gases, the Earth's atmosphere is warming rapidly, which affects many areas of life in the Great Barrier Reef. When Earth's temperatures rise, it causes things like mass coral bleaching, disease outbreaks, and ocean acidification. But there are a few things that cause more damage to the Great Barrier Reef. When temperatures change, the sea levels rise, and all of this causes the oceans to warm, the storm patterns to change, precipitation to change, and the currents to change. When combined, all of these impacts dramatically alter ecosystem function, as well as the goods and services that coral reef ecosystems provide to the people around the globe. If we want to get into it a little bit deeper, coral bleaching is one of the most noticeable changes to the Great Barrier Reef. That is what I have pictured below. It is caused by thermal stress from ocean warming. When the sea levels rise, the ocean sedimentation increases, the coral is smoothened out. And then when the storm patterns change, it leads to stronger storms, which also ruin the reefs in a more destructive manner. When there are changes in precipitation, it increases runoff, which aids sediment damage and causes the water which blocks sunlight, which alters the way that the reef is growing. All of these things individually might not seem like such a big deal, but when you put them all together, it completely tears apart the reef. There's a lot that we as humans can do to ruin the environment around us, but there's also a lot we can do to help them or reverse what we have done. For climate change and saving the Great Barrier Reef, we can do things like not driving when we do not need to, recycling, being more energy efficient, using less chemicals, and choosing to eat sustainable food. Whatever we can do as humans to sustain our environment and make everything a little